Game two between the Heat and Knicks is on Tuesday night, and we give you the latest updates on Jimmy Butler's injury. But how will Miami adjust if he misses the game? Plus, Bill Simmons thinks that Damian Lillard will end up in a Heat uniform. We'll break down a potential trade, and Miami's run in the postseason has the NBA questioning the value of the regular season. We'll debate that and more on today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're going to get to a recent trade connection made between the Miami Heat, Damian Lillard, and Trae Young, and ask if these playoffs have proven that the bubble run wasn't a fluke. But let's start with the latest on Jimmy Butler, who injured his ankle in Sunday's win over the New York Knicks. Spoelstra today said that Butler is getting around-the-clock treatment, and the team won't know if he's going to play Tuesday night until right before the game starts, and that the Heat are preparing to play with or without him. He's officially listed as questionable, as you and I know, David. That doesn't mean anything in the Miami Heat world of gibberish injury reports. So, David, what's the plan if he doesn't play, and who do you think starts in his place?
I don't think we have to overthink this. It's Caleb Martin. He's the obvious player. He's the only one who could provide a reasonable facsimile of what Jimmy Butler could do. With Victor Oladipo out due to injury, there's no reason. I know that Spo likes to play some gymnastics with his juggling of the rotation. He doesn't like to supplant somebody who's deeply embedded as far as the second lineup or rotation is concerned. And he usually brings somebody, a complete fluke off there. But, the same way that we looked at what the options were when you were trying to sub out Max Strus as a starter or and inserting Kevin Love into the starting lineup. He's the only one who actually had the ability to provide some size against the Milwaukee Bucks. Similarly, if you're going to try to stop what RJ Barrett, Jalen Brunson in particular, and everybody else can do, then Caleb Martin is your only realistic option. You're not going to go Haywood Highsmith for whatever defense he can provide. And while there's the opportunity for Duncan Robinson maybe to offset whatever he gives up defensively, if he catches fire from beyond the arc, that's too big a risk that you're not willing to take. So to me, it's a pretty clear-cut answer. Caleb Martin is your starter tomorrow night if Jimmy Butler isn't available.
I think I disagree with you.
Oh, well,
This feels like a Haywood Highsmith playoff start.
No way.
We know what Eric Spoelstra likes to do, man. He likes to keep that bench unit in place. He's been very reluctant. He's had a lot of opportunities to start Caleb Martin, whether it was in the play-in tournament or in the first round. Like you mentioned, Tyler Herro gets hurt. We had the conversation, do you start Caleb Martin now? He's been very reluctant to take Caleb Martin out of that second unit because he does stabilize that second unit so much. And Eric Spoelstra, as we know, likes to kind of look down the bench a little bit further down to the fringe rotation area and get a guy from that group and elevate that guy up to the starting lineup. Because now when you're losing a star player like Jimmy Butler, instead of just elevating your best player off the bench and then it sort of has that domino effect across your rotations, you kind of pluck that guy in the fringe of the rotation, like Haywood Highsmith, for instance, and now you're not dealing with the domino effect of your rotation. You're keeping Kyle Lowry and Caleb Martin coming off the bench and anchoring that second unit. And I think Eric Spoelstra really likes Caleb Martin coming off the bench, as evidenced by having other opportunities to start him and not doing it. So this to me feels like Haywood Highsmith going out there, starting and playing 20 minutes or something, and you're probably elevating Caleb Martin's minutes. You're probably increasing that a little bit. No doubt. But defensively, he's long enough. You could put him on RJ Barrett. You could put him on Jalen Brunson if he plays. He was listed as questionable with a right ankle injury on today's injury report, so we'll see. But and I think Spo likes having those guys sort of bracketed by your better starting players as opposed to coming off the bench and maybe kind of getting lost in that mix there. And then offensively, he's not going to do a whole lot for you. It's going to put more of an onus on Gabe Vincent, Bam Adebayo, and Kyle Lowry as you go further into the game. But that was going to happen anyway, regardless if it was Caleb Martin or Haywood Highsmith starting in Jimmy Butler's place. So I actually do. I think it's Highsmith if Jimmy Butler can't make it a go.
We'll see. I can understand the argument. I just think that's far too much in the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out whether or not Spo plays those little mind games, And look, I get it. Highsmith can provide some defense right away. He's going to provide that defense off the bench too in limited minutes, and that's just to give Martin a little bit of a rest. But you want to make your first impression. I think the risk of, and I know it's not much of a risk. You did what you were supposed to in terms of winning at least one game on the road in New York. But if you want to be able to close out the series, and that's what Miami's looking to do. If they're going to sit out Jimmy, it's because they've got a long-term, bigger picture in mind. They want to advance past the Knicks and take on the Celtics and maybe even beyond that. I mean, as unlikely
assuming
as
the
that might
Celtics are
be.
going to beat the Sixers right away? You're just writing them in?
Oh, sorry,
The
Celtics,
conference? I
Sixers,
don't know.
yeah. Celtics, Sixers, right? Yeah, sure. Whoever or whatever opponent is next.
Yeah.
Miami's already looking ahead because that's just the nature of the playoffs. I know
I
one
don't know.
game at a time, etc.
You've already heard Caleb Martin say we're treating it like we're down 0-3, right? And so you could say that kind of stuff and all that kind of thing. We also saw them take game 1 on the road against Milwaukee and lay a complete egg in game 2, right?
But
so
Milwaukee made the adjustment in that case. They changed the way that they approach a game.
I think the Knicks will make an adjustment. Tom Thibodeau's
no
an
doubt.
awesome coach. Why wouldn't they?
No doubt. I mean, I think that's it, though. But if that's the case, if they're going to make the adjustment and Miami has to play catch-up, your best opportunity to do so is by putting the better option out there on the floor as far as the starter is concerned, and that's Caleb Martin. So,
do you think Miami could steal game 2 without Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, I've seen some of the talk. I know people are kind of feeling themselves a little bit. It's not necessarily doubting this group. They just need such a monumental performance from everybody else. Jimmy wasn't a superstar in game 1, but he commanded a lot of the attention from Knicks defenders, and you did get timely shots, plays, opportunities, opening up the offense, etc., from guys like Kevin Love, Kyle Lowry, Caleb, etc. Somebody has to step up. It has to be Bam Adebayo. He has to have that monster game because you're not going to count. I don't think there's another realistic option on this roster that can give you 30. Maybe Max catches fire as a starter. Maybe Caleb does. Kevin Love, I think he's going to top off at 15 to 18, and that would be fantastic. That's exactly what you want from a player of that caliber.
Sure.
I think
Bam's the only guy, to your point, that could do it from quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, just sort of consistently getting there. And I thought there were moments in game 1, like the Knicks, they play drop. It's not as aggressive as the Milwaukee Bucks drop, but there's going to be moments where he can kind of get to that free throw line jumper and dare Mitchell Robinson or Isaiah Hartenstein to come out and defend him. And if you start doing that, things get opened up with backdoor cuts and all that kind of stuff. But there is an opportunity for Bam Adebayo to go off. He had 2 good offensive games to start the series against Milwaukee, and he's kind of been out of the mix a little bit. He kind of disappears on offense the way that I think it's aggravated a lot of Heat fans over the last few years. But also Jimmy Butler has been going nuts. And if Jimmy Butler isn't in the game going nuts, now the onus goes back on Bam Adebayo. You're exactly right. This is a Bam Adebayo game. And yeah, maybe at some point in the series you get Max Strus making 7 3-pointers and he's got like 18 points by halftime, and you're like, okay, I guess it's a match. Or Duncan Robinson or Gabe Vincent or somebody like that.
Exactly.
But you're going to need Bam at some point in this series, and there's probably not going to be a better time than game 2, whether Jimmy is there or not. Because if Jimmy's playing, you got to imagine he's probably going to be pretty limited. That looked pretty bad. Right? I know he stayed in the game, but like barely. Like he stayed in the game in quotes. Like he was not playing in that basketball game after he got hurt. So they're going to need a big Bam game.
To answer the question, yeah, that's the only opportunity. I think they won't change their approach, though. I think that might be the surprising thing is like with Jimmy or without Jimmy, the strategy that worked against the Knicks in game 1 is probably going to work against them in game 2, regardless of whoever's in the starting lineup. So I think you have to go and hope that you can connect on offense. You move the ball frequently. We saw that in game 1. You're going to have to do in game 2. You hope those shots fall from the perimeter. If you're Miami, you hope they don't fall if you're New York. That's they dared New York shooters to kill them from the perimeter. It worked out. If Julius Randle returns, if Jalen Brunson wants
that's a big part of this too.
Yeah, that's the X factor, and nobody can predict exactly how. I mean, that changes the whole complexity of the game if Randle's out there, because he commands the ball so much, and if he's feeling it the way that he has, and we've seen those kinds of performances where he's just a dominant scorer. If he has that kind of game, well, there's not much that Miami can do. They can't send anybody to try and stop that version of Julius Randle if he's out on the floor, whether it's Jimmy, Bam, or anybody. They're not going to slow him down. And so you just hope that, similar to what we saw in game 1, you dare New York to shoot from the perimeter and get their points that way, and they miss more often than they hit. And if you were Miami on offense, you basically attack the basket the same way, move the ball, hope that Kyle, Caleb, Gabe, etc. is hitting from the perimeter, and you move from there.
Coming up, why these playoffs may have proved once and for all that the bubble was not a fluke. But David, first, tell listeners about our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. If you're buying tickets to your favorite events, well, that shouldn't be stressful. I mean, it's fun. You want to go to a concert, you want to go to a game, you want to go to a comedy event while you're in town or traveling, then what's the difference? Why would you want it to be stressful? And Gametime makes it so easy for you. It's fast and easy to buy the tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. Killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. You talked about it before. You love being able to get tickets on the fly. If you're traveling in town for a day or two and you want to say, you got a couple hours to kill, what can I do nearby? You look up Gametime. You can find a whole bunch of different events in your area, and you get the best prices available. You can use it for a sporting event. Let's say you get an afternoon off, you want to go catch some Marlins play. Why not? That's a good opportunity to take advantage of the Gametime experience. And what I love about Gametime is that when you use the app, you find exactly whatever seats that you're looking to get. You know exactly where you're going to sit, so there's no blockage from any kind of speakers or an antenna or anything like that. You know where you're going to sit. You get the view that you know that you're going to have throughout the event, and you can take advantage of their low price guarantee. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day, as we're going to be back tonight with a recap of Game 2 immediately following the game. Billy from Cleveland writes in, does the Lakers and the Heat knocking off the Grizzlies and Bucks respectively prove that the bubble was not a fluke? David, I feel strongly about this. You can, but go ahead.
Yeah, it was never a fluke. If you have that belief, if you ever had it, you ever held it, then you probably still hold it, and you're not going to find a way to change that opinion. And you're already looking at everybody finding ways to poke holes at what Miami has accomplished in the postseason so far. They won against a very good Milwaukee Bucks team. Oh, Giannis's injury. Oh, there was something wrong. Coach Bud going through a personal tragedy. So many different factors. I wouldn't
make light of the Boone.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm not making light of it. I'm just saying now it's just added to a pile of excuses for why Milwaukee lost the series, as opposed to why Miami won it. And so they're already doing that. Now they stole game one. And as we'll talk about later on the show, well, hey, maybe the regular season doesn't even matter anymore because it's just what Miami does in the postseason. So look, the bubble, and for those of us that were covering and seeing what this team went through, and to go through that incredible grind, you caught on social media, for your average fan, you caught maybe Dwight Howard having drinks by the pool. You saw guys fishing, etc. But for the Miami Heat that were in that bubble for 3+ months, that was an arduous process. What they went through, no crowds, I don't give a damn. That was the hardest potential option for basketball ever. That was more difficult than whatever this is. Like whatever basketball we see nowadays, the travel. I know that's a challenge. I know you get a home court advantage with yelling and screaming from Milwaukee. That doesn't seem to matter against Miami. Obviously, they won against Milwaukee on the road. They won against New York on the road. That's what good teams do. I don't think either the Lakers nor the Heat were a fluke. I hate that kind of talk. I've always hated that kind of talk, yep. And I think it's ridiculous.
It wasn't a fluke. And right now, the fact that the Heat and the Lakers advanced doesn't really do anything. To your point, if you thought it was a fluke, you probably still think it's a fluke because now it's a different thing. They're not playing in a bubble right now.
Right.
Look, every year, weird stuff happens, right? That year in particular, yes. COVID happened, and they were playing in a bubble. And the Lakers and the Heat both went out and dealt with the same thing that all the other teams were dealing with and made it to the playoffs. I don't think it was weird that the Heat made it to the playoffs. They just happened to deal with that situation better than the other teams did. I don't think it was ever weird that the Lakers made it to the finals because they had LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So it was never weird that the Lakers went to the finals that year. So, look, I think if anything, the Lakers and the Heat knocking off the Grizzlies and Bucks this year just shows more maybe the parity of the league, the fact that we've never had more talent in the NBA ever. You go to the regular season, and the Celtics had the best point differential in the NBA at +6.5. Well, you look historically over the last like 2 decades basically. And that's one of the lowest point differentials ever for the team with the biggest point differential in the NBA. That just shows you how deep the league is. It's not the Heat were better than, and maybe you can kind of say they were technically a 7 seed because of how they finished the regular season, but whatever,
Right.
7, 8 seed, whatever they were, more talented than your regular 7 or 8 seed. The Lakers are way more talented than your average 7 seed. Again, LeBron and Anthony Davis anchoring that team. So, but you can go like even the Hawks as the 7th seed. Like there's not a lot of 7 seeds 15
Golden
years
State
ago.
as a 6 seed, you know.
Exactly. Like there weren't a lot of 7 seeds from 15 years ago with a guy like even Trae Young and John Collins and DeJounte Murray on that roster. Like that's a talented Hawks group. They have other problems in the locker room and stuff with chemistry and coaching changes. That's a talented team. There's never been so much more talent in the NBA. Now, I think that's pretty cool in terms of it being a fluke. No,
it's not.
It's not. But let's talk about that because the regular season stuff. I want to talk about this idea that the regular season doesn't matter as much as it used to because you look at these playoffs, the 8th seed beating the number 1 seed, Lakers and Warriors both limping into the playoffs, right? And then knocking off higher seeds. The fact that the Suns overhauled their roster 2/3 through the season, played just 8 regular season games with Kevin Durant, and they're still considered one of the favorites. I'm not even bashing it because it makes sense. Right? Like David is proof that the regular season matters less than it ever has.
No, I think it's a lot of hand wringing. I love first and foremost whether there's actual cogent argument to be made about why the regular season does or doesn't matter as much as it once did. The point that I'm taking away from all this is that the Miami Heat have just forced everybody to look deep into the darkest places of their soul and ask, what the hell are we doing as a league, as an organization, as a structure, as a society? Because they've just really changed the perspective on everything. The fact that they went in there as an 8th seed, to your point earlier, you know, and just looked at Milwaukee and said, oh, you guys are good. No doubt. We're going to win. We're going to find a way to win. And I don't know how deep this playoff run goes. And look, shout out to the Florida Panthers. Go listen to Locked On Panthers. Great podcast. They did the same thing. You know, chaos in sports exists. That's what makes it fun. I just think that Miami struggled during the regular season for a number of issues, you know, with injury, with lineup changes, with lack of interest. And you know, I know that I lost faith after the second game against the Milwaukee Bucks. But even I said towards the end of the regular season, I said, what if Jimmy is just kind of not motivated to take over during a mid-February game that doesn't really matter, a game in December that doesn't really matter? What if he's just waiting for the rest of the games to actually matter in the postseason, and the team is kind of waiting to follow suit? Guess what? It's kind of played out exactly that way. And so I think the regular season does matter. To get back to the question, the regular season will always matter. It's about establishing habits, finding playing time, and even if you get into the nuances of it, the regular season matters because you're creating job opportunities for guys that are in the G League to prove their names. It's, you know, who the hell knew who Austin Reeves was 2 years ago, and now all of a sudden he's going to get paid a lot this summer, perhaps. So these things matter, and they'll always will. And I think it's just a lot of worrying about nothing. Similarly to what happened when Kevin Love drew, take the charge against Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he got hurt as a result. I think that was more about Antetokounmpo rather than Kevin Love playing dirty, as a lot of Bucks fans have suggested. And everybody was like, abolish the charge. Well, guess what? I don't think that's going to happen either.
The regular season matters. I do think that the NBA is worried that the NBA regular season is mattering less. Now, before I get into that, I will say this. Back to my point before, the fact that the Warriors and the Lakers and the Heat won their first round series, to me, is more of a reflection of the deep talent in the NBA right now.
It's a good thing.
And it's a great thing. Yes, of course, people have been talking about parity in the NBA not really existing. I don't know that I'm at the point of it existing yet. I still think that we have pretty clear favorites and teams that are like legit contenders and teams that just aren't, in a way that I don't know exists like in baseball and maybe even hockey and stuff like that. But I do think the parity is starting to expand a little bit more, especially after that, basically that run of Cavs Warriors every year. Like now there's like a group of like 5, 6, 7 teams every year going into it where you're like, they can win the championship. And that's a lot for the NBA usually.
That's great. Right? This is great.
So it's great. It's great. But in terms of the regular season mattering less, that's bad. But
it doesn't make the regular season matter less.
I know. Yes, I'm with you. Look, first of all, I have to see this for a few more years before I'm totally like, it doesn't matter what seed you're in, right? It
Well,
might just be a this year thing. But
one thing I have to say,
that
if I can add something to it, if I can add something, it's just, look, last year Miami was the 1 seed. Everybody they faced was supposed to upset the number 1 seed, and nobody was talking about whether a regular season mattered then or not. I know that a lot of Heat fans will point to, oh, it's a national media bias and this, that. I think that's a little bit too much conspiracy theorist for my standards. But at the same time, I just think that this is a lot of talk about nothing. Like, this is ridiculous. Then last year was the talent disparity.
No, look, I mean, it's fine. Like, 1 seeds lose and win, and 2 seeds, like, it's not just the 2 number 1 seeds that go to the championship every single year. But I do think that the NBA is a little worried about the NBA regular season because they started the play-in tournament, and then now they have this ridiculous mid-season tournament. And you wouldn't do that if you're the league office if you weren't worried about the regular season. Now, it's asking a different question, right? It's troubleshooting for a different thing that we're talking about right now. People are asking, does the regular season matter in terms of where your standing is in the playoffs? I think that's always going to matter. If you ask the Miami Heat right now, and as good as this playoff run has been, right, and you're beating the Bucks, and you're up 1-0 against the Knicks. If you ask the Heat before any playoff run, hey, would you rather do this, or would you rather be the number 1 seed, get all your game 7s at home, and play the worst teams in the playoffs? They do that one. Okay, as great as this run has been, they do the easier one every single time if you're asking them. So in terms of whether or not the regular season matters, it does in terms of the seeding. But I do think that the NBA feels like the regular season matters less for fans. Not necessarily for the standings and all that, but for fans. That's why they're creating all this, like they're trying to manufacture this fake intrigue stuff. And in that respect, I do think it's worth monitoring what the NBA does in the regular season and how it does have sort of these unintended consequences in regards to the playoffs and player health and load management and rest and all of these other things that the NBA is already trying to find solutions for. So that's all I'm saying. Does the NBA have a regular season problem? Yes, clearly it does, or else they wouldn't be doing all of these things. But I don't think this is necessarily the regular season problem that they have.
I don't know if I agree necessarily. I don't think they have a regular season problem. I think they're just looking for an opportunity.
They can't find interest. Viewership's down, David. Like it's flatly down.
That's because people are simplistic and can't handle watching every game. And
whatever the reason it is, David. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you.
That's why they're going to reduce the regular season to 16. Yeah, are they going to reduce it to 16 games?
No, but like that's why people talk about reducing it to like 63 games or 72 games or whatever it is. Yeah, like whatever the reason is, it is what it is. Like they do, like viewership is down, and they're trying to find ways to fix it. That's all I'm saying. I don't know that it's like this existential threat facing the NBA as a business, but it's something that they're trying to deal with. So like they have to make more money. That's how you make more money. Coming up, could this playoff run affect how the Heat approach the offseason and why it could actually help their case for landing Damian Lillard? That's coming up next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks and their new $1 million daily Superflex promotion. It's the every day of the NBA playoffs and the NBA finals. One PrizePicks user will win a chance at becoming a millionaire. One entry placed after 8 a.m. Eastern will be randomly selected each day, and whoever places that entry will be given a 6-pick flex for the following payouts. You can get 6 correct picks, you get $1 million. That's it. Top of the line right there. 5 correct picks, you get 80 grand. 4 correct picks, 16 grand. Full details will be found at prizepicks.com/million. You must opt in at this link to be eligible for the $1 million entry. But once you opt in, all I have to do is play the game like normal, and you could be the lucky winner. And playing the game has never been easier because it's PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's just you versus the projected numbers. You don't have to worry about going up against anybody else, and whatever wager they place with you is you just make an entry, 2 to 6 players, see whatever the projected numbers are. You place your wager, and you have a chance to win. And it's fast and easy payouts, really quick and easy to use, 60 seconds or less to fill out an entry. And you can do so on any sport you can imagine, whether it's the NBA playoffs or any other game, Major League Baseball, men's and women's college sports, disc golf, European soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. Everything is available only at PrizePicks. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up today to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users also get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with using the promo code LOCKEDON. So make sure to download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com today and play daily fantasy sports by entering the promo code LOCKEDON to sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers, we're going to be back tonight with a recap of Game 2 immediately after the game. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube and wherever it is that you get your podcasts to catch that. So a couple of trade topics that we haven't had a chance to get to over the last couple of weeks, but figured we'd get to them now. A week or so ago, Brian Windhorst reported on his podcast that if the Trailblazers were to make Damian Lillard available, that the Miami Heat would make a lot of sense as a destination and could be in the market to go hunting for a star. Put a pin in that, because then on Monday, Bill Simmons on his podcast came up with a trade idea that would send Lillard to Miami, Trae Young to Portland, and Tyler Herro and Victor Oladipo to Atlanta. So, David, a strange time for the Heat to be involved in this kind of stuff, right? Considering that they're still in the playoffs. I know that Portland and Atlanta aren't, but do you think that this run that they're currently on changes their approach to the offseason? What do you think about these trade ideas?
I don't think it changes their approach. I think their approach is always the same, regardless. To acquire a superstar whenever one becomes available, because you have to take stock in who you have in the roster and determine whether or not you can find a player better than those players. I think that's just the bottom line. That's how Miami's always operated with Pat Riley at the helm, and that's how they'll continue to operate moving forward. So if there's an opportunity to get a superstar, just as we saw last year with either Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell, or anybody else, they were going to explore it. It ultimately came down to the fact that they didn't have the right assets to be able to consummate a deal. You know what? If they can negotiate something with Atlanta and or Portland to get this deal done, I think they would do it in a heartbeat. As much as we appreciate Tyler Herro around these here parts, and we appreciate everything that Victor Oladipo is going to be, attempting over his last and latest and more, recent comeback here, I think they would still trade those two players if that's all it took, and whatever picks are necessary to acquire a superstar in his prime, looking to cement his legacy as one of the greatest players of all time by getting him a championship alongside Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. If you can do that, you absolutely take that opportunity.
When Brian Windhorst says something, I listen. He's as much of an insider as anybody, right?
Not so much Bill Simmons.
I think Bill Simmons is pretty plugged in. I mean, he called Russell
no doubt about
to
that.
Utah. I mean,
no doubt about that.
When he says stuff, I do listen. I don't think, I'm not telling you that I don't think he's reporting that this is happening or these conversations have happened, but he doesn't really just throw stuff out there. Love him or hate him, he doesn't really do that. Yeah. And he talks to people in the league. Like, that guy's plugged in. So, look, whether or not this is the trade or not, I have no idea. Nobody knows. But there's been now enough buzz. Probably too much to call it smoke. Yeah, like a buzz. But Damian Lillard, if Windhorst is saying it and Simmons is saying it, and there's enough there, even just Lillard's own public comments, right? That he might not be up for another rebuild in Portland. Exactly. And if the Trailblazers are going to make him available, then Miami does make a lot of sense. Number one, because I don't know that there's going to be a lot of teams lining up to. Damian Lillard is awesome. He's a great player, but he's 32 years old. He's going to be making $60 million when he's like 34, 35 years old. And I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of teams lining up to give him to offer the Kevin Durant package for Lillard, because as awesome as Lillard is, we're talking about Kevin Durant is one of the 15 greatest players of all time, and he's not a small point guard, and those players tend to age worse than bigger players like Kevin Durant is. So whatever. The fact that Miami is involved is not surprising. They were involved even after they were the number one seed, a shot away from making the NBA Finals last year, and they were like, we don't need role players to try to get us over the hump. What we need is a superstar. And so that's why they went out and got tried to get Kevin Durant, and why they went out and explored maybe Donovan Mitchell. And they're going to do the same thing this year, regardless of how this postseason ends up. I'll say this. The fact that the Heat are making a deep playoff run right now, right, however long it goes, is very helpful to them in their potential pursuit of a Damian Lillard. And because had this team not come back in that last quarter against the Chicago Bulls and lost the play-in tournament, or if they fizzled out and got swept by the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs, then Damian Lillard's going to look at this team and be like, that's not a team that's one Damian Lillard away from making the finals. Right. I could go somewhere else, right? Kevin Durant saw the one seed last year and said, yeah, put Miami on my list of destinations. It's Phoenix and Miami. There's a reason why Durant wanted to come to Miami, right? And so now that the Heat have kind of beaten the number one seed, and now they're in this series against the Knicks, and however it plays out, this has been extremely helpful for them, because now if you're Damian Lillard, you can kind of credibly look down and say, yeah, you know what? That was a good run that they made. They have Jimmy Butler. He's still got it. They got some nice pieces, Bam Adebayo, whatever. Put me in Miami, and we can get, Eric Spoelstra, we can get back to the NBA Finals here. And that's a place where I can win, because he's not looking for another rebuild situation. He's already got that in Portland. He doesn't want it. So the fact that the Heat are doing this is very beneficial for their potential pursuit of Damian Lillard. And by the way, however long it goes, I think they're still going to look, and you said this already, but I still think that they're going to look for a superstar, because they were that close last year and they were still in the market for a superstar. This team whether it's Damian Lillard or not, are going to be looking for a very big swing this offseason. I feel pretty confident in saying that.
Do you think that the fact that Miami has been able to accomplish as much as they have, and look, I mean, it's really just one series against a banged up Bucks team, and one game against the Knicks. But the fact that they've been able to do this without Tyler Herro, do you think it changes the front office's perspective about Herro's value as part of this organization, as opposed to the pursuit of said superstar like Lillard or somebody else?
I don't know. It's been it's been what, 5 games without Tyler Herro? Like, it's not that many.
Yeah, he played game
6
1.
games. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I think you kind of go larger sample size and you kind of know what you had with Tyler Herro. And I think it's obvious that they would admit they would need Tyler Herro in this series against the Knicks. I think that much has been clear. So, yeah, I don't think that they look at that Jimmy Butler going off with maybe the greatest playoff series performance we've ever seen and being like, yeah, now we don't need Tyler Herro. Just have Jimmy Butler do that all the time. Like, I don't think that's really the case. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I do think that he's valuable. I think
doubt.
I think you saw him make the he won 6th man of the year 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't agree with that line of thinking. I just wondered whether or not the front office might say, you know what, if we can do this without, like, Tyler is lowered in value in terms of, like, let's say organizational rankings of what they have. If you're looking at players coldly and viewing them as assets,
sure.
You've got Jimmy, you've got Bam, and then Tyler's a distant third, and maybe even
it's sort of the Jaylen Brown thing with Boston, right? It's just if you're the Celtics, you're never trading Jason Tatum, right? And so you kind of go down your list. You're like, all right, well, if we're gonna make a big swing, what's it gonna be? It's gonna be Jaylen Brown, right? Because you're not, like, Marcus Smart's not moving the needle for anybody in a trade. You know what I mean? Like, Al Horford's that's not doing anything. People are scared of Robert Williams. You can do the same with the Heat's roster. Like, Caleb Martin's nice, but he's not moving the needle for anybody. Like, you kind of just go down your list. You're like, okay, Jimmy's untouchable, Bam's untouchable. So if we're gonna make a big move, it's just got to be this guy. It doesn't mean you don't like Tyler Herro. If you're the Heat, doesn't mean that you don't value Jaylen Brown. If you're the Boston Celtics, it just means, like, you say, if you want to view it, like, players are assets. I'm sorry. Like, they just are. That's how these organizations view them. And so if you're looking to make a move, that's kind of how you have to look at it, right? That's just how you have to do it. It doesn't mean you don't like the player or you don't think that they're going to be awesome. It's just sometimes you got to make decisions. Like, if everybody could just trade, the 15th guy on your roster for a superstar, they'd do that, but you can't. So you got to make decisions. I love the idea of Damian Lillard, by the way, in Miami, whatever it costs. That's sort of the player that makes a lot of sense next to Bam Adebayo, right? Like, you've got and obviously concerns. Jimmy Butler too. What?
The injury concerns are dramatic for me. Yeah, it just seems like it's a recurring thing. Always towards the end of the season, kind of upsetting a playoff run there too. Like, and I know maybe part of that is like, look, we weren't going to do anything in the playoffs anyway. But then, if that's a bigger conversation to have, because I just don't know.
Well, this last one was a fake injury. They I mean, he was actually
that,
hurt.
The abdominal, like, he didn't have like an abdomen or something.
Yeah,
like that.
We've seen. I mean, Kevon Looney had that 2 years ago, and he came back and played 82 games the next year. Now he was 26 at the time, so I get it's different.
2 years ago, though, right? When they were rebuilding or retooling.
Yeah, but then he also played 82 games the next year, and then 82 games this year too. So he's been super durable since then. But again, younger, different body, whatever. If you're that's what I'm also saying. Like, there's not a lot of teams that are in the same position as the Heat that would even get in on the Damian Lillard business. Like, there's going to be a list of teams. It won't be just one, but there's not a lot of teams in the position of, hey, our superstar player right now, Jimmy Butler in Miami's case, is ready to go right now, out of the box, turnkey. Let's go win a championship, make it happen, just get him the help that he needs. Where you would be willing to say, yeah, that $60 million when Dame is 35 years old, that's going to hurt. We know that, but it gives us a legit chance to go win a championship in these next couple of years. And for us, that's worth it. I just don't know how many other teams other than Miami are coming to that same conclusion. You know what I mean?
I to add to that, I wonder if, and I don't know if Windhorst might have mentioned it in his podcast, but if Dame goes to that front office, given everything that he's sacrificed and the value of that, I wonder if he says specifically, I want to go here, Miami, in this case, will they find a way to make it happen in order to make him happy, given everything that he's done for the community and everything he's done for the organization? I do too.
I think
he has that kind of pull, like similarly to what we've heard from Jimmy. If
as
Jimmy
long
says,
as, like, it
you know
wasn't
what,
like,
this isn't working, I'm tired of Duncan or whatever, I'm tired of the organization, I want to move on, trade me to the Clippers, let's just say, I think they would find a way to get that deal.
As long as it's not, as long as the comparison in the deal isn't like, well, the Miami Heat are offering us 5 cents while X team over here is offering us $3.
Right.
As long as the deals are comparable, I think it would make it. And when something like that happens, also, it's sort of the fire starter for a conversation, right? It's sort of like, okay, well, let's get on the phone with Miami, Andy Ellisberg, Adam Simon, Pat Riley. Like, what's it going to take to make something like this happen? What do you guys, and then you kind of go from there. But yeah, I do think that there's a part of Portland's front office that could also use the good public relations that they would need after trading maybe the greatest player in franchise history, right? Like, you kind of want to be like, well, we work hand in hand. You don't want Lillard and his people sort of bashing the Trailblazers on the way out either, because that's never a good look for the front office, who's already kind of putting their neck on the line if they're trading somebody like Lillard in the first place. So.
And you get a young superstar in return. Like, if you have to trade the best player in franchise history in Dame Lillard, and you're able to acquire Trae Young, that's
like in the Bill Simmons deal, if it's a 3-way deal, and I mean, Trae Young,
that's a big step towards appeasing your Blazer fan base.
He sells jerseys at the very least. You know what I mean? So it's something to kind of build around and kind of anchor your vision on, right?
Right.
Whatever that vision is, whatever you think of Trae Young, I guess that's a different conversation. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube every day. We're going to be back tonight with a recap of Game 2 immediately following the game. So make sure you subscribe, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to the show. Thanks so much, David. Thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.